Are you old enough for an appointment? Well, the appointment of Mary Wambui Munene to chair the National Employment Authority has raised quite a storm. And President Uhuru Kenyatta was there sometimes back last year when he defended the appointment of Awori. And this is what he had to say.
I'm being criticized, I could see yesterday, that I'm appointing a 91-year-old to look after the youth sports fund. Lakini jameni, let me put yourself in my shoes. Ukiona vile watu wanaiba pesa. And this is money that we went and we passed the other day because we want to see how we can use this money to support us for our health programs, for our sports programs, for our arts programs. And these are programs that will benefit you. Alafu tuseme tupatie kijana, mimi afadhali nikae na huyo mzee bwana achunge hiyo pesa itumike vile inatakikana. Bwana. Ama mnasemaje jameni? Sini pesa ni yenu. Pesa ni yenu ya afya. Pesa ni yenu ya culture. Pesa ni yenu ya arts. Sasa mnataka tuende na tumeona vile watu wakipatiwa kazi kama hiyo vile wanaenda kufanya. Si afadhali tupatie huyo mzee achunge ndio iwarudie. Watu waniwache bana, mimi sitaki mambo mingi.
But it is also true that all the money that has been stolen in government has not been stolen in agencies that are led by old people. Or young people, rather.
I think, in my view, quite frankly, we are engaged in a false conversation because the age, as some people say, is just but a number. I think what we should be focusing more on is what kind of people are these? Are they competent enough? Because this idea that somehow certain people cannot get jobs because they are old and they're young people and that sort of thing, it really doesn't work. Performance doesn't necessarily correlate in a positive way with age. Some of the most successful people in the world actually are not exactly young. If you think about someone like Warren Buffett, who is one of the
richest men in the world.
In the world, he leads a company that is fifth most valuable in America. This guy is 83 years old, and people still, I mean, he's referred to as the Oracle of Omaha. People refer to him when they're talking about leadership, when they want to know how to invest and that sort of thing. If you think about even someone like Michael Bloomberg, but if you came back here, you talk about people like Samuel Doe. Kai would know a lot about him because he covered those areas. But this is someone who was, I think, 29 years old when he took over, and look at the kind of mayhem and chaos that he caused at only 28 years old. Now, you're talking about age in a country where we have seen, and the president had a point there, we have to admit that I'm not sure whether the answer is getting somewhat just because they are old, but he had a point in saying that I have had some young people and they have stolen money. If you look at the National Youth Fund, if you look at even NYS, I mean, some of the people who are mentioned there are not in their 80s or their 70s. So the question we should be asking is, first of all,
are they competent?
Are these people competent? Do they know exactly what they're supposed to do? Because if you listen to someone's name mentioned, it should ring a bell like, actually, that is a person that can do the job at hand. So for me, as long as we are focusing on age, we'll be happy that it's now not Mary Wambui, now it is some guy or some young lady who is 25. Is that going to make us happy if we don't know what kind of person they are?
And merit is not necessarily also about age.
Yeah.
It's about your ability, your competence, and your drive
to perform. And that, I think, should be the standard for everyone, young and old. But I have a different take. You see, I think the president and this administration set themselves up for this moment right here and all the anger that the country has. If you remember their campaigns in 2013, leading up to the 2013 election, what was the key message? There was literally a dichotomy in this country with the campaigns. It was the old guard versus the new. Uhuru Kenyatta at the time, digital versus analog, and I'll get to that. Uhuru Kenyatta was 52 at the time. His running mate, William Ruto, was 46. Their opponents were much older. Raila was 68, Kalonzo Musyoka was 59. And they consistently argued that it was time for the old guard their time was over, they should go out. Digital versus analog, which they even played into. Remember, at the time there was a digital migration, which was supposed to happen for broadcast, was supposed to happen that year, and they played on that. They said Raila had to retire from politics, the old guard, no fresh ideas. They even said, hey, you guys have served in government before. So they already created this narrative that it is the young versus the old. In fact, if you remember, there was then the hustling concept. In fact, that was the time the word was first introduced into our lingo. The hustler was supposed to represent the outsiders, those who are not part of the system, those who had struggled to make it in life, the young, the aggressive, and they make it up literally by the boots of their straps. So this is the sort of scenario that they set up in 2013. And so in a sense, this anger is just people responding to that you said it was about young people. You said the old should go home and retire. And suddenly they see all of these people coming back. Now, I agree that, young people, old people, it really should be about merit. But they really did bring this on themselves. And so in a sense, people are feeling betrayed by what they promised in 2013 and again in 2017. And they're just not seeing a correlation between what they said and what they're actually doing now.
In fact, Jamila, there's also another question that these board jobs, young people should not be asking for them. That is one part of the narrative, that they should be asking to actively participate in the implementation of policies generated by these boards. So they should be looking for active jobs, hands-on jobs, because the board sits maybe once a month or maybe quarterly. Yeah, so this
but they can still do their hands-on jobs and still be a member of a board. I'm not sure I agree with that.
Another point, because if you look at the
how many boards are there, honestly? I mean, if young people are actually going to be, I want to be a chairman of something. I mean, and even if you think about the Employment Authority or explainer notwithstanding, I would imagine that the role was to create an environment where jobs can then happen
for the old and the young.
Yeah, because Joe, when you talk about jobs for the old and the young, statistics, which Yvonne, thank you for sharing, show that about our unemployment rate is about 7.4%. And 85% of those who are unemployed are the youth between the ages of 15 and 34. Ni watu wengi sana. And before I continue, Robert, if you can hear me, I'd like you to play the soundbite about unemployment.
Kuchukua kazi hakuongea mambo ya vijana, kwa sababu mikakati iliyoko ni kwamba viwanda zinafungwa. Leba ina masharti mazuri sana, lakini kwa vile iko na masharti mazuri, mbona serikali inawachilia kampuni sikifunga?
Nataka mtu yote kutoka chini mpaka juu awe anasikia mzuri katika serikali hii, katika nchi hii, asikie mzuri. Muda wa kuchoma mahindi asikie mzuri. Muda wa certificate ya university apate kazi. Muda wa form 4 apate kazi. Muda standard 8 apate kazi, because njaa ni njaa, kwa mkubwa kwa mdogo yote ni njaa.
And that was actually one part of the discussion that was going on during the Sema the Citizen show today. Everyone, ninja, doesn't matter who you are. And opportunity should be available for all. And he's saying it, ataka unachuma mahindi, kwena kazi. So people need that opportunity. And we keep talking about competence. Let's go to this job. What has brought all this issue the past couple of days? The appointment of Mary Wambui to the National Employment Authority. And one of the issues is this. You spoke to Johnson Sakaja, who brought the bill in Parliament in 2016 that ended up in the formation of this authority. And we talk about competence, and we talk about the rule of law and why we have to follow it. Apparently, she was the holder of this office, supposed to have had at least 7 years experience in human resource.
Human resource management, or a similar qualification.
A similar qualification. Did Mary Wambui have that?
We haven't checked with that.
That's true.
She runs businesses, so we don't know.
But now, after this appointment by Mary Wambui, now we've seen now others starting to come up about how we're giving jobs to old people who should be retiring. In fact, the joke on social media is that my 80-year-old grandfather should toka nyumbani aende apatiwe kazi ya serikali. We have, and we discussed this, we have Jeremiah Matagaro, who was in government for a while, a long time ago.
Police spokesman.
And he's now going to become the chair of the State Corporations Advisory Committee for a 3-year period. The gentleman called Cyrus Gituai, who served as internal PS in the first Kibaki administration, he's coming back. He's going to serve, he had served as a district commissioner. We have the head of the public service, who they say, Joseph Kinya, is 68 years old, and the mandatory retirement age of civil servants is 60. Well, that's maybe the competence has kept in there. We look at Vice President Mudi Awori, who is in his 90s, who chairs the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund. So people, the youth are angry. You look at the anger on social media. What has been trending the past couple of days is about why not us? I know those jobs are not many, but you should create opportunity for us. One of the platforms that Jubilee was elected was this thing about jobs.
500,000
But then now they're giving jobs to dead people as well.
And it's really, yeah,
Sorry,
there's that that's been going on, and we need to actually confirm it. But
let me read this tweet from Steve Audi. He says, it's no longer about being old. They're now giving dead people jobs. Yani, you need to die to be guaranteed a job now.
It's a sad situation, Linus, because, like, for example, in that Kenya Film Classification Board, the late Robert Kochale, a former member of parliament from West Pokot, he has been reappointed for a 3-year term, notwithstanding the fact that he died on the 29th of May 2018.
A year ago.
And was buried on the 5th of June 2018. And CS Musheru has gazetted him today for an appointment, for
reappointment,
yes, for a 3-year term. And
He's been dead over a year.
Are these appointments computer, like automated? You know how like you have some...
Just picks a name, huh?
Yeah, I know.
But let me also interest you...
When you check some of these packages where it auto-renews, when ikiisha tu inaongezeka.
If you allow me, I'll also interest you in another one. CS Amina Mohamed, the Minister for Sports, has appointed Abshiro Halake to the Kenya National Library Services Board for a 3-year term. You guys, do you know Abshiro? She's a nominated senator by the Kenya African National Union Party of Kenya, KANU.
She cannot be.
And there's the whole separation of powers. You cannot be a member of the executive and at the same time member of parliament.
Legislature.
So then poses the question, Linus, even some of these guys who have been appointed, are they even aware that they are going to be appointed? Are they shortlisted?
Or better still, does the CS know exactly who is appointed?
The only person who I would for sure say is not aware of that appointment is the late Kochale. I'm very sure he's not aware of the reappointment. But let me go to this whole issue of age versus these other factors. To me, the sad picture that is being painted out here is the incoherence of the style of President Uhuru Kenyatta. He seems very conflicted on what style of government to follow. You know, the beauty with the presidency is once you are in office, it is your business to run the country the way you can. But for us here, we can point out that this is really, really incoherent. You know, you pointed out earlier the platform of election. It was youth, digital, young, and all that. It might have been reflected in a way in cabinet. But my interpretation of Uhuru's cabinet is fear of experience, fear of age. You know, because you look at that cabinet, you cannot pick experience. You pick people. And you know, from the days of Abraham Lincoln, governance is about being the leader among equals. You can actually have a conversation around a table and decide national issues based on the different experiences that can be put on the table by participants. You look at our cabinet, it's not reflecting this love for age. It's not there. You don't have an experienced politician, you don't have an experienced autocrat. You have people who are actually going into public service for the first time.
But Mwangi Kiunjuri has been in this game for quite a while.
There are few. There are few. The numbers should be a little bit more. And talking of that incoherence, I want to give an example. Because there has to be a certain pattern to how you govern. And you can actually see the pattern in Mwai Kibaki. Mwai Kibaki was about delegation to cabinet ministers. Cabinet ministers were very, very powerful. They actually made decisions, they gave ideas, and you can tell in a cabinet room, there'll be a very, very serious discussion between Mwai Kibaki and Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, the likes of
John Michuki,
the likes of, what's the name of the former finance minister? Muraria. You know, there is a lot of substance and weight. I know we are all football fans, and we may remember a manager called David Moyes, who took over from Alex Ferguson. He failed for 2 reasons. First, he couldn't get a pattern. He had no particular style of play. So, despite having very, very great players, so he had absolutely no identity. Number 2 was he never got his first 11 right. And that is in sports. Politically equivalent is President Uhuru's consistent experimenting, whether it's with the boards or whether it's with ambassadorial positions. You cannot tell what he's looking for. And time is running out. Next year, it'll be 2 years to the end of the term. And you're talking legacy, you're talking of vision. You'll waste a lot of time having arguments with the youth on whether appointing the old is right, and having arguments with the old on whether the youth are actually stealing, like he said at that time. So this incoherence in President Uhuru Kenyatta's style is actually what should be under discussion. It's not the age of those innocent, a lot of them innocent appointees. The other last thing I wanted to say about the appointees is, again, to the style of President Uhuru Kenyatta, it's a Thanksgiving ritual. That I appreciate you, Mzee Mudi Awori. Come and sit here, and it's not about Mudi Awori changing the game. He's 91 years old. You're putting him in sports.
Sports fund.
Sports fund.
But yeah. let me read a tweet by Dr. Ezekiel Mutua on the late Robert Kochale's reappointment to the board. He's saying, small issue being blown out of proportion. The board presented the notification to the ministry for replacement, and inadvertently he was reappointed. It was not CS Moshero's mistake at all, as the conversation started when KFCB was under the Ministry of Sports and Culture.
That's fine. It's been a year. This sounds like the whole computer era thing. Just as we wind up, I would really like to say, let's be careful to not create a very dangerous precedent of, saying the old are useless and they should go to the I mean, we really do have parents and there's people, like you said, it's about merit. But I just fear that with this conversation, it's just down the middle. So wale waende nyumbani, I mean, people don't retire.
This is what someone has said, actually. There's someone who has said here, Thuo Kimani Githuku says, it seems Ageyo has really benefited from this handshake. He's so keen in stating that argument of Uhuru Kenyatta is right. However competent Mudi Awori is, he deserves to be left alone to enjoy his twilight.
Look, they are very, very
Why don't
good.
we let him be the judge of
Yvonne,
that?
they're very good examples. It's not about age.
That's right.
It's not about age. I know you pointed out some private sector examples, but I want to give the example of Alan Greenspan.
Yeah.
Right.
The chairman of the Federal Reserve for 19 years across 4 presidencies.
And what about John Michuki that we celebrated here? He was not 25 when he was trying to...
I have an idea of who our own Alan Greenspan should be.
Who's that?
And he's nowhere in the list.
But
he's somewhere in government.
But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. The bigger picture being the millions of young people who are unemployed, or rather who are not in any gainful employment. And this is a serious issue, very, very serious issue. And that's why they have a concern whenever they see an older person getting appointed, a person who has been in government, they ask, and so when will we ever get into an opportunity?
But let's not get it twisted, FG, because what we need to do is make sure that those young people, the jobs are being provided for them. I understand that this is a moment for them to vent, but even if we give all young people jobs in boards, it still will not solve the problem of unemployment to the youth, and we need to put more pressure where it lies.
That old person that has been appointed, if they are competent, are they doing things that are then creating opportunities for these young people
and old?
Spot on. That's why I'm saying, let's not lose sight of the bigger picture.
Of
bigger
the big
picture
fight,
being that there are millions of Kenyans who have qualifications but have no opportunity to make use of their skills. And maybe this is where the government needs to be challenged to do something and help these young people either create employment or get opportunities in government. It is not possible for the government to create an opportunity for everyone, but at least something needs to be done. Otherwise, we will be in trouble.
Now, I just want to do this very quickly, because if you remember, if anyone is from my generation, you remember this cartoon called Courage the Cowardly Dog,
where he used to live.
He lived in the middle of nowhere.
So you're saying we go nowhere?
Let's go nowhere, and I'd like to actually, I'll start with you, because apparently nowhere is where you came from. You came literally out of nowhere.
I'm totally offended.
Which is Suswa, which is where the railway terminates. It terminates nowhere, which is where you came from. So literally you came straight out of nowhere.
The railway doesn't terminate nowhere. It terminates.
So you come from somewhere.
At Suswa station, and its head is at a place called Ola City. Yeah, it's supposed to be heading to
so is that the middle of nowhere?
Narok, and then to Bomet, to Kisii, and then all the way to Kisumu, because that was the original plan. So this railway has ended up in my county of Narok, not nowhere. And Suswa, by the way, is a very, very important place in the Maasai culture.
Do tell.
Big decisions.
Suswa declaration.
Are made there. And that's why I want to bring in President Uhuru Kenyatta speaking about this train to nowhere.
Leo Rais anaenda kufungua reli ambayo inaenda nowhere. Mimi nimesema sawa tu, kwa sababu huna vision. Unaona, unakaa Nairobi, unatembea kwa baa yako jioni, unaamuka, unatafuta matatu yako kwa sababu unaenda pahali unajua. Lakini fikira yako haiwezi ikuambie Kenya ya kesho, Kenya ya watoto wetu itakuwa gani? Huwezi, huwezi, huna maono jameni. And let me tell you, mupende musipende, nimalize kazi yangu na niende nyumbani, mimi najua Mwenyezi Mungu akinipatia maisha, baada ya miaka 20 nitarudi hapa, hii Ageyo na Suswa itashinda Nairobi.
Right, and I totally agree with the president. That will change Suswa. Suswa is a very remote place. But while at it, I actually think so newspapers are not for wrapping meat after all, because that story came from the Daily Nation, which said nowhere. Though journalistically, from editorial point of view, this should not be misunderstood. It was a very contextual story saying this rail had not reached where it was supposed to be. It was supposed to end up in Kisumu, I think, final destination. But
onwards to Malaba.
Yes, and if you go, for those of you who may use the Narok route, you'll actually see where it ends. And it
let's
ends,
see those photos of
the images of the
as you illustrate.
In Olasiti, actually. Suswa is the station, and then you go further ahead, and it ends suddenly. I don't know, for those of us who are from the old times when you had that haircut in a town that has power shortages. you go with only one side done, and I think that is where editorially the journalists at the NMG were talking of nowhere. I don't.
And I think it speaks also of viability, because there are many people who say if this rail line went all the way to Kisumu and then possibly now go all the way to the border with Uganda, then it becomes that much more viable if you think about the many number of things that can happen, because now it terminates in Suswa, which, by the way, is not Naivasha. I mean, a lot of people talk about the second phase of SGR going to Naivasha, but as Kai would tell you, Suswa is actually not Naivasha. So this one actually just has the Nairobi station, then you go to Rongai, you go to Ngong, you go to Mahiu, then you go to Suswa, and that is it. I mean, there's still the whole part of the journey, if you like, that is still left that could increase the viability of this thing. And I think that is where that nowhere question was like, and that's our station right there in Rongai. Did you see that one? It's beautiful. Rongai station. It's very beautiful. So,
yeah, but it still takes you more time than it did for Eliud Kipchoge to more than 159.
No, this is 23 minutes from the Nairobi terminus.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know how the train managers will manage the connection, Joe, from the Nairobi terminus now to the CBD, because only then will this make sense.
Okay.
If you're terminating people,
and that is where the nowhere also comes in. Some of those stations are really beautiful, but they're in places with no other infrastructure. You can't drive there. It's very tough.
And I'm going to say my last comment before we wind up, Yvonne, and I'll talk about what Harrison says.
Yes.
This is important. He says, SGR is not a priority for an economy that is not even food secure. Building $1 billion project like the SGR before fixing the most significant basics is like building the 4th floor of a building when the first floor has gaping cracks. I talk about this and also mention the demonstrations we've been witnessing in Mombasa in the past couple of weeks about the government directive of not allowing transporters to carry their cargo kutumia zile trucks za kawaida. The directive was mizigo yote ibebwe kutumia SGR. And of course, there are all these protests, people lost jobs. I'm told about almost 1.7 billion shillings has been lost. About 2,000 people lost their jobs because of this directive. And about 2 weeks ago, we saw the Minister for Transportation, we saw Minister Matiang'i, we saw leaders from Mombasa County at the steps of Harambee House saying that that directive had been suspended. But till as late as yesterday, we still had the transporters protesting that the directive has not been implemented. And for them, this is really hitting very close to home. They're losing their jobs, their livelihood is being affected. It's a good idea, I think, to some extent, Yvonne, but I think the implementation needs to have been done in a better way.
Let me have some economic facts for you. So this Nairobi to Naivasha phase is phase 2A. Phase 2B is Naivasha to Kisumu plus the port and to Malaba. It was cancelled by the Chinese. Remember, this was the infamous when the president went for that summit in China last year. He was denied the funds. The main financier, that is China, essentially said phase 2A and B are not viable, but they will finish phase 2A because they've already began. Let's talk about the viability of this whole thing. The African Development Bank did a study of the entire enterprise. These were their findings. One, that the entire railway did not have a good return on investment. They found that it was less than 3% compared to a world standard for a project like this of 9 to 13%. The report was rubbished. Fine, railways need 100 years investment, so we can't really measure it. But here's the thing. If you put, this is what economists tell me, if you put the cargo plus passengers on this train, from Mombasa, by the time you get to Nairobi, 50% is offloaded. 40% is offloaded in Kampala if it were to go all the way. And if it were to reach Kampala, 10 to 15%. That's the import leg. What is exporting? Much, much less than this. Therefore, there's something in question about the import versus export. It would be good if we're having resources that are going on this train for export. But mostly what this is for import. And when you take a look at where it's terminating in Naivasha, it's supposed to be a special economic zone. Is it a viable one? Again, I'm told for a special economic zone, it has to have proximity to the port, that is an airport, and a seaport. Where is Naivasha? It's terminating in Naivasha is solving what problem
it's very
exactly?
Close to Susua.
All right. This is a discussion. I don't think we're going to finish anytime soon. We need to wind up, ladies and gentlemen, and it's time for Memo, Take, Angle, Punchline, Kicker.